Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we're going to take a deeper dive into Camtasia and look at how you can make videos that wow with effects, behaviors, and annotations. In today's webinar, we're going to take 45 minutes and we're going to build off the Getting Started webinars, and we're going to look at ways that you can take your video to the next level. Today's webinar is a little bit different in that we are going to expose various features of Camtasia that will likely get into how video editing is more of an art than a science. So we hope by exposing these things to you and these features that will inspire you to create your own video workflows that work best for you, with ours as just a basis. In today's webinar, we will be working on Camtasia 2020 and we'll be using a PC. If you have an older version or you're working on a Mac, that's perfectly fine. A lot of what we cover will still apply to you, and we'll be sure to cover any major differences. So following that 45 minutes, we will have a Q&A session. So before we get into the presentation and the Q&A, we're going to get some housekeeping out of the way. So with that out of the way, let me introduce you to the person who's going to take you through Camtasia today, and that is Jason Villad. Jason, hello.
Hey, Ryan. It's funny you called out those very specific things that are happening in my neighborhood right now as I work from my home office, but I'm really grateful that people are joining us today for this deeper diving into Camtasia session.
Yeah, and Jason, I'm realizing I didn't introduce myself. I am Ryan Bort. I'm the brand experience coordinator here at TechSmith. So that means I handled these webinars and other events that TechSmith runs. So Jason is an instructional designer here at TechSmith, and he's a trainer. So he works every day with our customers and with our product, teaching people like you how to use the software. So he's the perfect person to teach you digitally as well. So Jason, with that said, I think you were going to get us started with some poll questions.
So largely what we're going to do today is we're talking about making videos that wow. We're going to walk through some effects, behaviors, assets, and different possible workflows in Camtasia. Like Ryan said, I'm going to show you a lot of things today. The goal for you could be that you take away one or two things that are really solid, that help you move to the next level in your video creation process, and then try not to do everything all at once because it's a lot of power. So with a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility. Therefore, use the things that work well for you. And the way I'm going to show you how to do things might be different than even how you would do them, or Ryan does them, or any member of our team. Great. So we're going to start with, we'll go into the new project here. We're going to open up the editor in Camtasia, and I want to start talking about what makes a video engaging. Now we're going to do this a little cooking show style. So I actually have a recording that I already did earlier, and I'm going to put it here on my tracks and have it right here on the canvas. And we're going to ungroup this so we have it all ready to go. This is a pretty basic screen recording that also includes my webcam. I just kind of left it as vanilla as I possibly could. So plain Jane. This is a screen recording where I'm walking through how to add someone to a generic progress tracking board, something like like an Asana or something like that. So the goal of the video was to make sure that people were able to learn how to do the process and get done with the video what they needed to get done. What the purpose of that video is that simple instruction. Therefore, if I play this video back, which is pretty simple. Hi, everyone. Let's take a look at what it takes to add a new member to a progress tracking board. Here we have our generic progress tracking board. I'm not even going to go through the whole video. It is me literally walking through how to add someone to the board. It answers the question, which is how do you do that? And it's an effective video, but it may not be all that engaging. So let's talk a few different ways that we could make this video more pleasurable to watch. Because let's face it, as the content creator, if you make a video that's interesting to you, there's a good chance that people that are watching it will also find it interesting. And therefore, they'll come back to that content to learn more or rely on you in the future for existing videos, whether it's clients, customers, or in my case, coworkers that want to learn more in the style that I teach them. So let's start with some built-in basic effects inside of Camtasia. First and foremost, we're going to start with callouts. And the callouts are found over on the left-hand side in the tool bin underneath annotations. And there are a series of different types of callouts that are built in here to Camtasia. We've got shape callouts that have text inside them. We have arrows with text. We have text itself. We have things as simple as lines and arrows that you can add to your video as well. Basic shapes. We have what I call a little bit more deeper, blurring and highlighting and spotlighting tools. We have sketch motion callouts. And then as needed, we also have the ability to add keystroke callouts onto the screen to show the capture of a keystroke if that's part of your process. So we could start with something very simple, like let's add a arrow callout to the screen. So at a certain point in the video, I talk about clicking a plus button at the top of the screen to add a new person. In order to do this, we're going to click on the plus button at the top of the screen. Okay, to add a plus button to the top of the screen. So I'm actually talking about it right up here, far away at the top of the screen. So I'm going to click and drag this callout onto the screen. I'm going to just reposition it so it's facing the direction I want it to. And then it's comically oversized for what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to size that arrow down. And for me, I don't need any text in this one. So I'm simply going to double click on the text and hit delete. And then it's a matter of placing the arrow where I want it on the screen. Now, when you add a callout to a project in Camtasia, it comes on as its own piece of media down here on the timeline. And it can be placed, like I said, wherever you want it to be. It can be sized, as we just did on the screen, and it also can be adjusted based on the duration or how long you want it on the screen. So right away, when I play this video back, that arrow callout is just going to pop up on our screen. In order to do this, we're going to click on the plus button at the top of the screen, which will bring up this Manage Members option menu. Okay. Real simple addition to a video, having a callout just pop up on the screen and point at what I'm trying to draw attention to. Easy enough to do, right? Now, for those of you who are experienced Camtasia users or someone who's still new, there's a few things you can do with the callout itself. Once it's selected down here and highlighted on your timeline, you can come over to the Properties panel and make some subtle adjustments. You could do everything from changing the size of it right in here based on its the scale slider. You could change its opacity if you wanted it to be a little bit transparent. You can do that. You can adjust its positioning in a very specific way with your X, Y, and Z coordinates. You can change the text component, whether it's the font, the color, the size, the justification. You can even make subtle changes to the callout shape itself by clicking on this last tab. And I could choose, maybe I chose an arrow, but what I really wanted was, instead of this rounded arrow, I wanted to go with a little bit more of a tapered look arrow. I could do that as well. I have control over the color of the arrow itself. I have control over the outline, which is currently white. Maybe I want to make it something like, I don't know, this nice green. And not only do I want it green, but I want it obvious. So I can adjust the thickness right there. So I can make a nice, obvious arrow for myself. I have control over these components of the callout to make it a little bit more engaging. Maybe I have a colorway or color branding that I'm going to use from my company. I could match those colors here with the hex codes or RGB codes, or if I have a theme built into Camtasia, and we actually talk about themes in a series of other webinars, but we can also share that information with you. I could actually use the drop-down menu here if I have themes installed and go to, well, in this case, let's go to my TechSmith theme. And it matches us with this yellow color that's part of our branding and a green color from the Camtasia series of color greens. Now, this arrow pops on the screen, like we said. If I enjoy this arrow and it's exactly the way I want in terms of size, color, shape, I can actually make the next video I want to make quicker and easier by saving this particular callout as a custom callout for myself. And this is actually something new with Camtasia 2020. And to do it, all I need to do is make the adjustments like we made over here in the Properties panel and click on the plus button in the upper right-hand corner. And when I do that, it adds it to a group of callouts called user-styled callouts. So if I'm in my annotations tool over here on the left, one of the style options underneath the drop-down menu is user. And I now have this arrow that I can use multiple times across multiple projects as I see fit. So it's really, really a powerful way to maintain some consistency and use a tool set like this annotation, this arrow, that's good for me. A way to up this just a little bit is you can actually bring this call out to life a couple different ways. A very simple way, and a way I do it quite often, is I actually can apply a transition to this piece of media. And that would be just coming over to the transition tool set over here on the left-hand side of the editor and choosing a transition. Classically, I use the fade in, fade out. And to do that, I would just grab the fade tool, click and drag it onto the arrow. If I drag it in the middle, I'll see that a fade in and a fade out is applied. And when I let go, now instead of that arrow just popping up on the screen, it will gently fade in. So let's play that back for just a second. I'm going to click on the plus button at the top of the screen, which will bring up this Manage Members option menu. I think that just looks really clean. It's a real easy way to add a light amount of polish with very little effort. It's wonderful. I love it. So you can add transitions to your callouts as well so that they have a little bit more polish to them and give it a little bit more, I'm going to use the word rewatchability, even though that's probably not a word. Another way to up the game of these is you can actually add behaviors to your callouts. And I'm going to show you that now. Let's move a little bit further down the video where I talk about clicking the next plus button, which is this one down here. So let's play that back. Create a new member. So we're going to click on the plus button at the bottom of our list. So right around here, we talk about clicking on this plus button at the bottom of my list, and then a new menu shows up. So right in this area, I can add another callout. Well, hey, we just made that arrow that we like. Let's just reuse it. So I'm going to bring that arrow in, and I'm going to point right to that plus button as I want, as I see fit. And I'm going to add a behavior. Now, if you're not familiar with behaviors, they're over here on the left as well. And behaviors were added, oh my gosh, someone correct me in the chat. I think we added behaviors in Camtasia 2018. I'm probably wrong on that, but someone will correct me. Behaviors are a combination of animations and transitions and movement that are built into a one-click and drag action. They work with any still piece of media. They are optimized for text. So more often than not, you'll see people put behaviors on text to get text some movement. Well, you can actually add them right to a still piece of media. So in this case, instead of just having our arrow pop up on the screen, and to change it up just a little bit from the fade that we had before, we're going to add a behavior to this callout. And I'm going to add my favorite behavior. My favorite behavior is this one, the pop-up behavior. So I'm going to click on it, drag it right onto that callout. And when it turns green, I know it's applied and I can let go. And now when that arrow pops up on my screen, it will use that behavior. So let's play that back here for a second. Manage Members option menu. We're going to create a new member. So it might not come through on the webinar really well, but it starts on the bottom and it pops up into place. And then while it's on the screen, it actually wiggles back and forth. And then at the end, it peels off and folds back down. It's fun. I like it. It's not exactly the way I want it. And actually, one of the things are really enjoying about Camtasia 2020 is I can customize the behavior to exactly the way I want. You can actually always do that with behaviors. Let me show you what that looks like. With the callout selected that I've got the behavior attached to, over in the properties panel, there is a behaviors tab that shows up, and a behavior is built into your project with 3 actions. There's an in action, how it comes onto the screen, a during action, what happens while it's on the screen, and an out action, how it leaves. So the in action for this one is a hinge style spring that comes in from the bottom. So it comes up from the bottom of the screen. Not my favorite. I like old school realty signs. Like if you're going to sell your house or you see a house for sale, you know, sometimes in the front yards, they have those realty signs that kind of swing from the top. They kind of hang off a pole so you can see the sign and call the agent if you're interested. I'm going to make one of those. So instead of the bottom direction, I'm going to have it swing in from the top. So now when I play that video back, the arrow is going to pop in, but it's going to come in from the top instead of from the bottom. I just kind of like the way that looks. The during behavior right now is set to do that same pop-up, and it kind of flexes back and forth. I'm not a fan of that. I actually just want it to stay still because I want it pointing at the area that I want attention given. So I'm going to click the pop-up, and I'm going to change it to none. So the during action is going to drop in at the beginning. It's going to sit there and do nothing. And then in the out stage, instead of it having go through the bottom like it was originally designed to do, I'm going to have it go out the top. So it comes in like a hanging sign, stays there, and when it's done, it's going to pop back up. And I can adjust how long it's on the screen, you know, based on the duration down here in the on the timeline. Now, just like the call out we did before, I don't want to have to do this behavior adjustment every single time. And with 2020, I don't have to. I can also click that plus button up here at the top right and add this one. And I'm going to get a chance to name it. So I'm going to call it Realty Pop-Up because I know what that means for myself. It's that Realty sign style. When I hit OK, it adds it here to my behaviors so I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can drag that onto any other piece of media that I want in the future. Oh, by the way, if you're really creative or want to be kind of creative or really want to add pizzazz, you can actually stack behaviors on a piece of media. In fact, I think we're limited to 3. So I already have the pop-up one. I could do this. Let's do the fly-in behavior. We'll drag that onto the same piece of media, and we'll do the scale one as well. So I now have 3 behaviors: the pop-up that I already adjusted, this new fly-in one, and the scale one. So now if I bring my playhead back, it's going to scale in, slide in, hang in, bounce, move around, do all kinds of crazy stuff, and fly out. Maybe a little intense, but I wanted to show you at least that it was a possibility that you could add more than one behavior. And for me, I'm going to just click these off and remove those 2 extra ones because I kind of want to stay with the one that I've got. All right. So this is a couple of great ways to add just a little bit of wow factor using callouts with some of the built-in animations here on the screen. But there's one big part of this video that already bugs me, and I'm the one who recorded it, and that is this website that I'm using, this mock-up website that we use, is kind of small. I even scaled it up when I recorded, but it's kind of small and it's hard to pay attention to. And there's a lot of this open white area on the sides and this gray area on the bottom when all the action is happening here in the center part of the screen. Well, I can change that by using an animation effect called zooming. I can zoom right in on my screen, and it's actually very simple to do. Let's go ahead and play my video back and see where my intro ends, where I'm done kind of talking about what we're going to do. Hi, everyone. Let's take a look at what it takes to add a new member to a progress tracking board. So right about now, I talk about the progress tracking board. Now I think it would be a great idea to zoom in on the screen to give it a little bit more detail. They already have the context. They see it's a website. That's okay, but let's add a zooming in effect so that we can see clearly what's happening on the screen. To do that, I'm going to select my screen recording, which on this case happens to be on track number 1. And we're going to go to the Animations tab. Now here in Windows, there is a Zoom and Pan tab that exists. If you're on a Mac, it's underneath Animations, and you would use a custom animation. But for this example, we're going to use the actual Zoom and Pan here on the Windows side. To add the animation, you click, like I said, on the screen recording. There'll be a representation of what's happening on the screen here. And I simply drag these handles to show where I want the focus brought to. In this case, I'm just going to zoom in to the center part of the screen. And I'm going to remove the zoom from my webcam because I still want to stay there in the side. We could, of course, animate the webcam, and maybe we'll do that a little later. But now I've added this real subtle zoom to draw attention to the center part of the screen. To add a new member to a progress tracking board. Here we have our generic progress. Now, just like any other animation inside of Camtasia, I have a lot of control over how that zoom works. Not only can I set up the position of it by dragging the handles around, or in this case, even moving it around to different parts of the screen. In fact, if I do any kind of left to right movement, that's actually not called a zoom, that's called a pan, as if you were focusing the camera. But down here on the timeline, I can adjust how fast or slow the animation happens by lengthening or shortening the arrow, the animation arrow here on the timeline, to show that if I extend it a little bit, it'll actually go a little slower, a little bit more gradual zoom. Board. Here, I think that looks pretty nice. And I can play with this as much as I want. I always have to remember, though, with any video project, do I need it perfect or do I need it by Tuesday? And most of the time, I need it by Tuesday. I don't want to let perfection get in the way of completion. But you can have a lot of fun. And like I'm showing here, you can quickly make subtle adjustments in Camtasia to add some polish and pizzazz to your videos. The last thing I want to show you in this section of the webinar is there's actually quite a good listing of cursor effects that you can use in Camtasia. The cursor effects are found over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And you have a couple things. You've got your standard highlighting of the cursor. I actually customized a blue cursor highlight that I added, and I can tell that I added it because the little avatar is sitting down here on the left. You have the ability to magnify your cursor, to spotlight your cursor, and actually new with Camtasia 2019, we added the ability to do some cursor smoothing, which is great for me because I talk with my hands, and because I talk with my hand, you might even see this during the webinar, I talk with my mouse. Well, the cursor smoothing automatically adds a smoothing effect to any of the cursor movements on the screen. So the first thing I would actually do with my cursor, if it's something that I'm going to draw attention to on the screen, is I'm going to make sure that my screen recording is selected. I'm going to come over to the properties panel and choose the cursor at the top and maybe scale it up because it's pretty tiny there on the screen. I usually, if I'm going to scale it up, it might be in the 150 to, let's say, 175% range. It gives it a little bit bigger. It's not comically oversized, but it allows for people to be able to see it clearly. And then I add cursor smoothing to this as well. And to add cursor smoothing, all I need to do is click on it over here in the cursor effects, click and drag it down onto the piece of media on the timeline, and let go. And just like that, cursor smoothing is all set up to go, and it's applied for the balance of my project. Super easy to do, a wonderful piece of polish that I would do to almost every video, right alongside doing general transitions of fading in and fading out. Ryan, I'm actually going to take a pause here to take a sip of water, but I'm going to see so far of what we've covered. Have there been any questions that have come in or things that people want to know that I can lean on my knowledge or lean on the wonderful knowledge of the tech smithies helping us out with today's webinar?
Yeah, Jason, actually we got a couple that I want you to touch on. So the first one, if you can go back to the zooming area, we got a question here from Teresa. She said, okay, I've zoomed in, I've got it, but now I want to pop it back out to how it was at the beginning.
Yep.
Is there a way to make it automatically pop back to its original position?
There most certainly is. The easiest way to do that, to jump back out to where you started, which in my case, I scaled it. It was fit perfectly in my canvas. I could see the entire recording in my canvas, and that's where it was back here. So I can check that by clicking and moving it around the actual screen recording. You can see the canvas area, this dark area on my screen. That shows where the visible area of the canvas is. So if my recording fits in there perfectly, that's what's called scale to fit. It's fit perfectly into that open area. When we zoom in, you can see that it's only focused on that little section and it no longer is scaled perfectly. So to get it back to that scale to fit section, there's actually a button. I call it the Jason button because thank goodness they put this in. It just eliminates math for me. I click on the scale to fit button as long as I have my screen recording selected, and it'll jump right back to that same point where we started. And I'll delete the animation from my webcam because I kind of want that to stay still. So now the animation zooms into where I wanted it to, and then it zooms back out whenever I need it to. I have it set here just as the example, but that's how you would do it. You would click on the screen recording here in your timeline, and then choose scale to fit from the zoom and pan animations area.
Perfect. So the next question I have for you, Jason, is from Nicole. Nicole wants to know, you showed them how to stack behaviors, right?
Right.
Can you save those as its own preset, or do you have to save each individual one and apply them individually?
So the question is, we talked about this particular call out and we had stacked behaviors on it. So let's do that again, just show it. I'll just grab two here. We'll do the fly in and we'll do the reveal. So the question is, can I click to save as all three of those behaviors at once apply to one singular behavior? I think that's the question.
Yep.
You cannot do that, Nicole. You actually would need to individually save whatever changes you made to your different behaviors. So that is not a possibility. However, if you're using that same call out, like if we're going to use this arrow again and we want all those effects that we applied, all three of those different behaviors at once, we could always right click on that piece of media with those behaviors attached and choose add to library. Then that arrow will be added to whatever library inside of Camtasia that we choose with those behaviors attached to it in the library. So I could repurpose that again, but I could not save the behaviors stacked together as one behavior. Although that is the absolute first time I've ever been asked that, And I'd love to learn more about what your potential use case for that would be. But thanks for asking that question. We appreciate it.
Okay, and Jason, when you showed cursor effects, you really piqued a couple people's interest.
Yeah.
We got some people asking if you could show the highlighter and how that works.
Yep.
And then we've also got people want to see what cursor smoothing actually looks like. I don't know if you have that video ready, but if you could show that as well.
Yeah. So let's pull up this video. So this video I recorded for a demonstration a little while ago. Are you seeing this on your screen, Ryan? I just want to double check.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, so before I hit play on this video, this will just quickly show cursor smoothing, then we'll go to the highlight question. I previously used a mouse, I think it was called an MX Ergo. It's one of those ball mice where it stays in one place and you move it around with your thumb. This is an actual recording of me just going through those numbers and clicking them with that mouse. I have a big screen, so it takes a little while to roll it across, and I would click on the numbers. And then what I'm going to show here is that I'm going to take that actual recording, I've copied it, so there's 2 copies in Camtasia. I'm going to click and drag cursor smoothing onto that new version of the recording, and I'm just going to play it back. This is cursor smoothing applied to that same recording. There's no jitteriness. It's nice and clean. It's nice and smooth. It immediately makes me look way more professional with pretty much zero effort on my part. It takes out any of those little pause movements, or if it's not in a straight line, like if I'm moving my mouse around and I'm kind of doing it in a snake motion, it'll remove that sort of activity. So it's pretty helpful. In fact, it's rare that I ever put a video out without cursor smoothing in place. Just a great polish. In terms of cursor highlighting, the way that works is if you go into the cursor effects on the left-hand side of the screen and apply the cursor highlight to the recording track, the screen recording, when I click and drag that down here, it literally adds a highlight around my mouse. Now, because it is an effect, I do have control over that over here on the in the properties panel. Everything from the color of the highlight itself. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I really like this green color that we used on our arrow. We'll pretend it's part of our branding. If I click on the drop down here and use the color picker, I could grab that green color. There we go. And I now have a green cursor highlight. I could adjust the size of it. I could adjust how soft it is, blend it on the edges, and maybe even its opacity. So I want to have it there, but I want to still be able to see what's behind it. I have complete control over what that looks like. And when I have it exactly the way I want, if it's color branded or exactly related to the projects I'm working on, I can hit the plus button right on the cursor highlight and make my own customized one. I'll call this one soft green cursor highlight. And when I click OK, it adds that specific cursor effect that I just created, that customized effect, to my cursor effects. And by the way, we didn't mention this in this particular webinar, but one of the other aspects of Camtasia 2020 is once I've made any of these customized tools or any of the tools inside of Camtasia that I want to use on a regular basis, I can actually hover over them and click on the star in the upper right-hand corner. And when I turn the star from white to yellow, it adds this tool to this menu called the Favorites menu. So when I click on my favorites, I have the tools that I favorited right there in one spot. So maybe I go back into my annotations and I really like that arrow I created. I now have that in my favorites menu as well. I can do it with behaviors. In fact, let's do that. We did that realtor pop-up sign here. Click the star. I now have that available in my favorites menu. Just a way to quickly get to that same consistent look by adding quick polish and not having to redo these every single time you make a video.
Okay, Jason, and just to kind of keep this same train of thought, we do have a couple of people asking, if you go over to your properties panel on the right, there's at the very top, there's that mouse, like the arrow.
Yeah.
And then, yep, and then the tab to the left of that, what are those?
So these tabs are dynamic. These change based on what you have selected on your timeline. They are part of the properties panel and they allow you to make certain changes. So right now, the only thing we have selected on our timeline is our screen recording. So the tabs available for the screen recording are everything that can control the recording itself, which includes the scale of the recording. So we made that really big and small. We'll get that back down to where it was here. We can also change its opacity. We can change its position. And then the tab on the next one is the mouse tab. And we actually played with this a little earlier where we changed the scale made the mouse a little bigger. And since we added effects to the mouse itself, those show up here, like cursor smoothing and cursor highlight. If we choose another piece of media, like for example, our callout, our arrow callout, those tabs dynamically change at the top. The first tab is always the general sizing, opacity, and position of whatever you have selected. And then the tabs after it have the effects that are specific to that. In this case, there's text that can be used on the text callout, so I have control over the text, as well as the theming colorability, as well as the properties of the callout, the shape of it, its fill, its outlines, its thickness, and stuff like that. If I pick a piece of media that has something else on it, like this one has a behavior, a new tab is added that allows me to make adjustments to the behavior. So this properties panel, very powerful part of Camtasia, underutilized in my opinion, but it gives you that real finite control that you're looking for to make your video the exact way you want it. And largely it'll help you tie it to a brand or a theme or a stylized type of video that you can make each and every time.
Yeah, and honestly, I think if you're going to take your videos to the next level, simply understanding that panel and those tabs is going to take you a long way.
Absolutely, especially with font. Font is a big thing. You have a font that you use with your company and it's installed on your computer, it should be available through Camtasia. So do not neglect the properties panel in Camtasia.
Absolutely. So Jason, that's all the questions we have for this part of the presentation. I know we're going to hop into ways people can add a little polish. I'll let you get to that.
Great. Okay. And like we said, keep those questions coming. We appreciate those. So the next thing we do want to talk about is applying another level of polish. And this is where you can actually lean on a lot of assets that come as part of Camtasia by default. Those assets that we're going to talk about are customizable assets, and they're found in the Camtasia library. So if you select the library tab from the left-hand side of your screen, and there should be a drop-down menu at the top. And when I open up my drop-down menu, there's a ton of stuff in there because you may not have known, but you can make individual libraries for different projects. We just released a new product called Nomia yesterday. So I've been making tutorials for Nomia for weeks, getting ready for that. I have a folder that's just based on Nomia content. I have stuff that's just based on Camtasia deeper dives, like webinars like this. But the library I want you to focus on is this one here. I have both Camtasia 2019 and Camtasia 2020's library. I'm going to show you 2020's. It's very similar, if not the same, as 2019. There's just some extra assets in the newer version. When you open this library, you have a series of royalty-free customizable assets that you can use in your projects right away. So we have icon packs, which are here in this folder. Anything from different headings like buildings and businesses and education. So these are vector form graphics. So if I want a graduation cap for the people that are celebrating their graduation in this interesting time we're living in, I've got an image that I can use right away. I don't have to go search for one on the internet. It's available to me right now. We also have animated introduction sequences. We have animated lower thirds, motion backgrounds, royalty-free music tracks. All these things come into play as part of your license of Camtasia. You can launch them and use them right now. I think the part that's most powerful, though, is a lot of these intros, lower thirds, and outros are customizable. And let me show you what that looks like. Our video right here starts with just me and the screen recording. Now, I could fade in the screen recording. In fact, I might just do that real quick because it's easy to do. I'll go to my transitions. I'll grab my fade transition, drag it right down here to the middle, and I'll fade in my screen recording. And I'm going to use the cube rotate on my webcam because why not? It's my video. I can make it look exactly the way I want. It's kind of fun. Okay, but the video just starts abruptly. I think it would be very helpful and add a little bit of professional polish to give it an introduction. So let's do that. I'm going to take my playhead and drag it all the way to the beginning. Here's a pro tip. If you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and click and drag the playhead to the right, I can create a gap here at the beginning of my video, but keep everything else in sequence and nice and tight, aligned, synchronicity. Wow, in sync. I think I need some more coffee, Ryan. But I now have this large gap at the beginning of my video that I can utilize to lean on some of those assets inside the Camtasia library. So let's grab an intro. Some of my favorite, I'll grab my favorite intro just because I always do, I love it, is this state intro. And I'm going to click on it and drag it down into that open space at the beginning. So this animated introduction is a series of pieces inside of Camtasia that all work in harmony with each other. There's shapes, there's animation, there's text, there's movement. It's very easy to click and drag that down onto your timeline and all of a sudden add a professional looking introduction sequence. But because it's customizable, you can make the changes based on what are called quick property assets. Long story short, we take another visit over to our properties panel over here on the right. Remember we talked about how powerful that is? We're not kidding. There are components to, or different parts of each of these intro sequences, the lower thirds and the outros that you can change. So I can change the title. Instead of your text here, let's change it to, we're just going to say add a teammate, because that's what we did in our video. I hit enter. Just like that, the title changes. Subtitle, we'll call this one new role. So just like that, I've changed my title and my subtitle. If I have a logo or a picture or something I want in place of this, I could change that out by clicking the X and locating it on my computer. I could change the colors, I could change the shapes, I can make it look however I want. For me, I tend to lean on my themes. So I know I have other themes in here, and I'm going to use this generic Acme theme. When I click on it, it changes the colorway, it changes the font, it even changes the logo for me because I built it into the theme. It's pretty awesome. And all of a sudden, I now have a customized introduction to my video. So when the video plays, it has this animated introduction. It fades out, and then my video comes into play. Now, in previous times, it was very difficult to close gaps, but I can do that with some easy tricks inside of Camtasia. If it's a single track, I can use track magnetization, but for me, I've got multiple tracks going on. So to get that gap closed, all I need to do is double click on the media that I originally moved, hold that shift key down again on my keyboard, and click and drag the playhead back until they match. So now when I play this video back, which we'll do just here for a second, we'll see our introduction. And I can, change the duration of this or add music to it or voice over anything on the intro. And then that fades out and my video fades in as I set it up. Hi, everyone. Let's take a look at what it takes to add a new member to a progress tracking board. Okay. So by utilizing things that are already built into Camtasia, everything from animations and the callouts, cursor effects, and some of these assets that are already here, I can make a pretty compelling, pretty polished, wow-looking video with very little effort. A lot of people have come to us and said, I want to make a cool-looking video. Well, cool is subjective, right? There may be aspects of this that are like, wow, this is amazing. This is exactly what I needed. And we have barely scratched the surface of things that you can do in Camtasia. As a matter of fact, there's something really interesting that you can do that's built into Camtasia to add even a little bit more dynamicness to the video. One is, this is a basic screen recording. I've made hundreds of thousands of these. But wouldn't it be nice to have it look like it was actually on a computer? Well, you can do that pretty easily as well. You can use right here in our Visual Effects tab, there's an option called device framing. And if I click on a device frame and click and drag that onto my screen recording, now it looks like my screen is actually on a computer. Pretty awesome. As a matter of fact, if you have that selected here on your screen, you can change the different frames based on what might be loaded in your computer. There's maybe I want it sitting on an iPhone. That's not really set up for that, but I could use that option. I could put it on a MacBook Pro, so it looks like it's on a laptop, maybe even a generic monitor inside of a warehouse. And there's some movement in the background, so it looks like it's actually sitting in a warehouse. One of the options you will see at the bottom of the device frames is this. It says download more, and I'm going to show you this real quick. If you click download more, it'll actually take you out to the TechSmith assets for Camtasia. This is an asset library online that allows you to download other assets, everything from device frames to themes and templates and intros and outros. There's video, there's stock footage. There are a lot that are free that you can sort through by changing the filters over here, but it is also a paid program that you can pay. I think the cost is $199 for a year, and it's wow, I think it's nearly, yeah, it's almost 1 million assets that are available to you. So if you start making a lot of videos and you want to change it up for yourself, there is the possibility that you can make a different video every time out with using both the things that are built into Camtasia as well as assets available through this asset library. Okay. There is something else I want to show, Ryan, and then I know we're getting kind of close. One big component of Camtasia 2020 was the inclusion of what we call templates. I'm going to save this project because this one was fun. We did good with this one. We'll just call this, we'll call it sample for right now. So templates allow you to, kind of take an existing style of video and right away make it yours with a little bit of dynamic action. There's animations, there's stuff called track mats, which I know one of the links in that document that Ryan will share in the email gives you a link to a program we call Camtasia Insider. If you have time and you're looking to take your videos beyond the next level, track mats are what are going to do it for you, and it's already built into Camtasia 2020. But I'm going to show you a project here by going to File, Manage Templates, and I'm going to open up a template that I have here in my template manager. When you launch Camtasia 2020 for the first time, you'll have this default template here. It's easy to make new ones and you can download more, but the one I have here is called the Circle Profile Picture. And I'm going to click New from Template, and it's going to open up this template for me. I had some bike footage still in there, so we can get rid of that. That's not a problem. And what this is going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to make my video even more dynamic. If you remember, and I have it saved here for just this purpose, the recording that we just did, or I showed you, was that of my screen recording as well as my webcam down here in the corner. Okay. Just a pretty standard screen recording. People have seen those kinds of things before. You've got your screen recording sitting here, but mine now with this template has this little circle in the bottom. Well, the circle is part of that track matting we were talking about. And let me just show you quickly what it looks like. I'm going to scale my screen recording up, and I'm going to take my webcam and I'm going to drag it down on my timeline into this thing called a placeholder. And when I replace it in there, I am going to have the option to put myself in this little circular like hole punch. And then all I need to do is add a track here at the bottom and put my screen recording behind it. Now, instead of that standard picture-in-picture style video, I can watch the same style of video, but I'm going to be in this matted circular corner spot. So if we watch the video back.
Hi, everyone. Let's take a look at what it takes to add a new member to a progress tracking board.
And then all I need to do is go through and zoom and pan and add animations just the way I did before. So I can still go ahead and zoom in. And I'll make sure I take the animations off of my video, off of my webcam.
Board. Here we have our generic progress tracking board.
Something to be said about not looking at the camera the whole time. By the way, it's impossible to pause a recording of you on a webcam and have you not look kind of silly. I've just never been able to do it for myself. But by using track mats and some of those pre-built templates, you can take your videos that you're making on a regular basis and not only make them consistent from one to the next, but you can also explore the different options that are out there, including, I think we just released 5 brand new ones if you're in the higher ed or any style of work, that you can make some more dynamic videos based on those templates that are available. Ryan, we have covered a bunch, like you said we would. We talked about everything from what makes a video engaging and the fact that there's movement, maybe some color, maybe some personalization, drawing focus to things by using callouts or zooming into an area or changing things to match colors for companies. We talked about things like adding transitions. We talked about cursor effects, not only the highlighting, but the cursor smoothing, which I live for and love. We talked about customizable assets, intros. We didn't do any outros or lower thirds, but those are all built into the library and are all customizable using that properties panel. We showed a device frame, which couldn't be easier to add instead of just clicking and dragging it onto the recording that you did. And we even teased out a little bit about track mattes by showing this example of the template. We're running short on time, but I want to make sure that if there are more questions that have come up throughout this period, that we can kind of take a look at them and explore answers to those questions.
Yeah, Jason, obviously the track mat thing drummed up a couple questions. So what I want to do is, Jason, would you mind pulling up either that handout or that YouTube channel that you were talking about?
Yep. So this is the handout.
Yep. And on Camtasia Insider, you'll see that down at the bottom in Learn More. If you click on that link, it'll take you to this YouTube channel. And this has got plenty of videos to take you through more than what you need to know about track mats. So you'll be able to create something like Jason had if you watch a couple of these videos. I mean, in fact, there's one called How to Create a Circular Video. If you watch all of them, you'll be able to do some pretty crazy things, and you'll really only be limited by your creativity. So if that's something you want to dive into, I encourage you to download the handout before the webinar ends, or it is in the follow-up email, so you can download it when you get the follow-up email later today.
And the thing is, Ryan, several of the people that created the videos in this playlist are answering your questions today in the background of the webinar. So you could not be in better hands.
All right, Jason. So now we'll get into some of the questions that people asked us about some of the other topics. So the first one I want to bring up is people had some questions. This one's from Julia. You showed how to add effects. If you add an effect or a behavior, how do you remove it if you decide you don't like it?
Yeah. So let's add an effect to our shape. Well, we'll add it to the screen recording. So if we went and added an effect such as the device frame, if we click and drag that onto our screen recording, and we've added in this desktop look, right? So we're here, and then we zoom in closer, which I'd probably adjust how it zooms in. If I'm making the video and I'm like, you know what, this isn't exactly what I want, I think I'm going to go in a different direction. You come right back over here to the properties panel. You select the piece of media that's been affected. In this case, it's the screen recording. And then I just need to find the applied effect, in this case, a device frame. And all I need to do is hit the X. It removes it. No harm, no foul. And that goes the same for cursor smoothing, highlighting, color adjustments, those kinds of things. Behaviors, I do this often. I'll put a behavior or two on a piece of media and see how it looks. And if I like it, I leave it. If I don't, I hit that red or that X, and pull it off of the project and move on.
All right. So Jason, the next question I have for you, people, when you added the intro at the beginning of the video, we had a couple of people actually say, hey, we have in my company, we have an intro video that would just pop at the beginning of a recording. How would I add an existing intro video to the beginning of my screen recordings?
So to add any kind of media that you already have existing outside of Camtasia, the easiest way to do that is when you're in your media bin, here at the top of the screen, there's a plus button in the lower left-hand corner. If you click that plus button, there's two options, the ability to import media or to import from Google Drive, because we have a connection to Google Drive. If you have it stored locally or even on a connected network, folder or file structure or drive, you just select import media. It'll take you out to your computer, and you can simply go in, find out where that content is. Like maybe I want to go into here and grab this JPEG. I now have that image available for me inside of my project with very little effort.
Perfect. And Jason, I actually have a follow-up question on the previous question about removing effects and behaviors. Matthew's wondering, how do you remove it in terms of I want it to only exist for 30 seconds? So let's go with the cursor effect of the yellow dot. Maybe I only want that yellow dot there for 30 seconds. How do I then remove it later?
Oh, okay. Let's go ahead and add that. Let's go to cursor effects. We'll go to our yellow cursor highlight. I'll click and drag it onto my screen recording. When you add an effect to a piece of media, not only does it show up here in the properties panel where you have general controls over appearance, color, size, and stuff like that, but if you look at the bottom of my track number 1, when I added that cursor highlight, this little triangle shows up at the bottom. This is actually a drawer. I'm going to expand the track up just a little bit. And that, when I click on it, will show that the cursor highlight has been applied. Well, that cursor highlight itself can be manipulated in terms of when it's on the screen and when it's not. You can actually click and drag from left or right on the edges to show where on the track that cursor highlight's going to show. So maybe I only want it on this, I don't know, this 8-second section of the video. So let's watch the video here. We'll play it back.
Add a new member to the board so that they can contribute.
So the cursor highlight should turn on now.
In order to do this, we're going to click on the plus button at the top of the screen, which will,
and then when it gets to the end of that section,
a new member. So we're going to click on the plus button at the bottom.
It turns off. If you need to have it turn on and off multiple times in the same piece of media, then you'd need to rely on using your split tool and just apply the cursor highlight to each individual section. It's a little bit more advanced, but not too hard to do at all. And it would give you that same effect where you can turn things on and off depending on your use case.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jason, for answering all those questions and for your demo today. But I do think that brings us to time for today's webinar.
Okay.
So I want to remind everybody that this was a deeper dive webinar in a very specific part of Camtasia using effects and behaviors and annotations. We do have other webinars available, and we're constantly scheduling those out. So even if you can't register for them now, if you keep an eye on the webinars page, which again is in that handout, that will be a great place to sign up for webinars in the future. And we also have old recordings on our YouTube channel. There's a playlist, and again, that is on the, I believe that is in the follow-up email, so you can always check those out. So as a reminder, this whole webinar was recorded, and we will be sharing it, including the question and answer session at the end. So you should get that later today. And it will also come in an email with another way to download the handout and some other assets that we think you might find helpful as you are starting to use Camtasia more and developing your skill set. I want to reiterate that there is a 4-question survey coming up. Basically, it's an opportunity for you to tell us how you thought we did today and what we can improve, so the next time around we can provide a better webinar if possible. So we would appreciate it if you took the time to fill out that feedback for us. If you have any questions, you can go to support.techsmith.com. And again, that resource handout, it's got that in there. So feel free to download that. That's a great resource for you to just continue to learn. But that's all we had for you today. We appreciate you all coming out and diving into Camtasia with us. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you at future webinars. Thank you.